Good afternoon across Australia. I'm Dante St. James, and welcome to a bit of a relaxed look, I think, this afternoon. Going to go for something a bit more chilled, slower pace of turning what you love into webinars and workshops. I've certainly been able to do a lot of that myself through Business Station, which has been a great way of having some sort of outlet for all those things you need to get out of your head, but that you also love doing. And that's the whole point of today, is to look at the things you love doing. For those of you who are watching live on Zoom right now, being a webinar, you're able to participate in the chat and the question and answer. So the Q&A and the webinar chat, you're both able to communicate on those. So if you'd like to ask a question as we're going, you are very welcome to do that. There's quite a few of you online today, so thank you so much for joining. If you're watching this afterwards on YouTube, any comments you've got, just put them down below, and the team from Business Station and myself will come back to you with that. But you can then watch it, I think, in a couple of days' time. It'll be on my YouTube, which is at Dante St. James. So youtube.com/at Dante St. James. And then the same for Business Station, youtube.com/at Business Station. Let's get that screen shared and get this show on the road as we learn more about how to turn those things you love doing into workshops and webinars. And we're live. Hilary Swank, one of my favorite actors, she says there's only one life. You only have one life. And if you're not doing what you love, what's the point? Really quick and to the point with that one. And I guess that's the point. You're doing that thing that you love doing. It might be that particular kind of passion you have. You may be someone who's in digital marketing. You might be making scented candles and soaps. You might be hosting retreats for men or retreats for women, yoga retreats, something that you absolutely love. And everyone said, oh man, you should be making money out of this. This is awesome. And you've decided it's time to do that. But the first step, of course, is getting people to know, like, and trust you. And that's what creating webinars and workshops is all about. So what we're going to look at is how to identify what that expertise is that you're going to take onto webinars and workshops, how we then turn that into workshops and webinars, and then looking at some of the structure of that, as well as the essential tools that will help you to create a webinar or a workshop. This is brought to you by Business Station and the Digital Solutions Program. You can find out more about that at businessstation.com.au. And like I said before, this is going to be available on YouTube. Just look up either Business Station or my name, and you'll be able to see this in a couple of days' time when you can watch this again. If you missed anything or you just wanted to, see it again in a little bit more depth. So a bit about me, I collect a lot of badges, everything from being a Canvas certified creative through to being a story brand guide of entrepreneurship facilitator. It's late in the afternoon. It's only Monday and I'm already stuffing up my words, as well as being an advisor with Business Station and a certified lead trainer with Meta, or Facebook as they're known as. I do a lot of stuff. I really love what I do. And that's what I do, is bring it into webinars and workshops. I'm doing nearly a webinar a day, which you might think, how in the heck does he do that? But bear in mind, I've done probably over 350 individual webinars over the last 4 years. So I can recycle a lot of stuff. In fact, just quietly, I've done this webinar 5 times. This is my 6th time. So I'm always very confident in what I'm presenting. You don't have to invent something new all the time. What we found when we're working with webinars and workshops in 2020, when the world kind of, went the way it went in 2020, is that we had a rise in webinars use of 441% that year, because suddenly we couldn't meet in person. But what we found is that after all that's over, that 42% of people don't want to go back to being in person. They either don't want to go back to working in an office, or they don't want to go back to meeting in workshops that are taking place in person. Now, that's only 42%. It means 64% of others do want to go back and do these things in person. But think about that. That's a big chunk of people who don't want to go back. We've discovered that Tuesdays are when webinars are the most highly attended. In my case, it's certainly been Thursdays. That tends to be the day where I get the biggest numbers in. And it generally tends to be later in the day, like now. Like at the moment, in my part of the world, it's 4 o'clock. In your part of the world, it could be 4:30. Or in Western Australia, what is it? 2:30. So there, you're looking at different times and different time zones. But I find that Tuesdays around this time are really ideal for me to get across those 3 states. With workshops, though, we discovered in 2020 they reduced by 92%. So you can see that workshops, while they were very much not available in person very much, but some still did happen if you wear a mask and you follow all the rules. But 92%. Well, we found that in 2022 it was still half the 2019 level. Now, this was earlier in 2022. We have certainly picked up towards the end of 2022 and into 2023, where we've got not quite the 2019 level, but we're getting close to it again. And the best attended for workshops, things where you have to go in person, tends to be after hours, after 5 p.m. in whatever jurisdiction you're in, is when those workshops are best attended. My biggest attended workshops are almost always on Saturday mornings. It seems to be the time that people aren't working. They might still be in a work mode, or they want to learn. That might be a time when they're allocated to learning. So that tends to be a really good time. Excuse me. So with all this in mind, why would you host a webinar and workshop? It seems to be so up and down that some people, preferring to do these as webinars, but very few sort of coming back to do workshops, or an increasing amount. We're starting to see that it's certainly rising. I'd say by the end of this year, we'll be back to almost the exact level we were in 2019. Why you want to do this, though, is because webinars and workshops, unlike just a social media post or writing a blog or maybe making a video on Facebook Live, develops authority and trust that cannot be replicated in any other way. Whether it's a webinar that's happening on Zoom, or it's a workshop that's happening in person in a community center or in an office in a meeting room, it allows you to present your knowledge and expertise of your industry. It allows you to show very niche and specific expertise in what it is you do. And above all, it puts a very real face to that business or industry. People will often think of wanting to start to go into a different industry or a different kind of work, or to improve their lives in some way. And a workshop or a webinar where there's a group of people involved means you can kind of hide yourself a little bit. You don't have to stand out. You don't have to speak up. You can just go, well, you know what I'm going to do? I am just going to sit in the back and observe. And I certainly have done that a number of times myself in workshops, where I don't intend on being the star of the show. I just want to listen and learn. The presenter of those workshops often has different opinions on that and really wants me to take part. So it's almost like you can't avoid it. But on a webinar, very different approach. On a webinar, it's harder. It's easier to hide because you just turn your camera off. Now, that might seem rude. It might seem like you're not participating, but it's a safe way for someone to approach you as a business owner with expertise that you're trying to sell. So what you're finding is that rather than people feeling really nervous about turning up to a physical location, meeting people they don't know, having to do small talk and all that, a webinar might be a really good way for them to get hold of that authority and trust that they've developed with you, get that industry knowledge, that expertise, and still see you as the face of it. But they don't necessarily have to invest a lot of their participation in it. So webinars can be really good for that. What they also do is they build business relationships and they build brand awareness. The time in a workshop or a time in a webinar is a time where you can build connections between you and your audience. You can tell stories, you can tell anecdotes. I still remember, funnily enough, my first live workshop that I did, with this program would have been 4 years ago now. And I wasn't quite sure what I was stepping into. I'd run workshops before, that's for sure. But what I'd not done is done workshops with this particular group of people. At the time, they were paying, $20, I think, to come into one of these workshops. So in they came, they marched on in, and we sat around a table and we started working on this particular thing, and which was all great. I really enjoyed that, but I had no idea what I was doing. So what I did, instead of trying to present a death by PowerPoint, we built time to connect and hearing each other's stories and the struggles that people had in this particular piece of technology, and it was Facebook, that's the one we were talking about, and how they would, how they had worked around some ideas themselves, and some of the places where they went, look, I don't know what I'm doing. I really need help with this. So the connections wouldn't have been quite the same through a webinar. So that first time I did that, I was able to share, look, I'm not hugely experienced at this, but I'm certainly got the expertise you're looking for. Let's have a chat. The other thing that it gets you is their email address. Because when someone books for your event, they book for your workshop, your webinar, they send you their email address. And what that gives you the ability to be able to do is add that to a marketing list. You're not going to spam the crap out of everybody. Don't go down that path. That's just bad. What you're doing though is things like a follow-up. So thank you for attending my webinar or my workshop. If you've got any more questions about it, we can talk about this. Just book a 15-minute free consultation and we'll run through any feedback you've got. A great, really, really good way. Oh, excuse me. That was almost a disaster. Picked up my drink and sneezed at the same time. You pick up their email address in order to help to follow through, to be able to introduce more ideas, to go deeper on the topic. And that pathway after the event allows people to go beyond just simply the brain tickle. I call it the brain tickle when you go to an event or a webinar or a conference and you get all sort of, oh yeah, I'm really ready to go. And what you find is that fades really quickly. The moment you get home and life's real problems, an uncooperative child, a lazy husband, a bill that you didn't expect that's going to land in your life all of a sudden, those things they derail you. So have that pathway after the event, such as just an email to touch base, or it could be, for instance, you've finished doing this one. Now I've got this series that you can follow on with. Or after you've done, we can do this, 3 1-hour, free sessions through digital solutions. Well, then you go, well, maybe now this is, something which I could get past the distractions of life and get back into that space where I was in a conference. I really, really hate and love conferences and workshops. I'm kind of the same with them because I always go into it thinking, oh, I'm going to hate this. Like, it's going to be boring. I'm going to sit there and get a sore bum from sitting on a chair for 2 hours. And then I usually walk out of them all going, wow, I've got some ideas. I want to go and do everything. And of course, real life happens and you don't do it. So having that pathway, having that email contact after the event is a really big advantage. It allows you to deepen the relationship that your attendees have with you rather than just who they met in that workshop. It also gives you a better understanding of who your potential customers are going to be. If you get a room full of people, if it's 20, 30 people, that's a really good sample of the kind of people that you may be trying to sell your products and services to. So you get to know what the questions are that your potential customers might actually have because they're asking them right there in the room. You understand what their needs are, what their challenges are, what their hopes are, what their dreams are, what the things are that really get their goat and grind their gears in everyday life that you can add some kind of assistance with. And then you can use that whole experience of having people in a room or having people on a webinar to better tailor your services and products better. If there's questions being asked about a process that you undertake that people don't seem to understand, that's the perfect opportunity for you to go, you know what, I need to rewrite that thing, or I need to find a better way to describe that product or a better way to position that product or service to be able to be better understood so people don't feel confused. One of the great enemies when it comes to marketing is people who are confused because they don't quite know what it is you do or how it somehow relates to them. So that understanding of your target audience is a valuable piece of feedback to get from these groups rather than one-to-one. One-to-one skews everything because you think that the problems that one single person has represents everybody. But when you get a group, a significantly sized group together, you start to see that those same problems they had before are going to come up again and again in people. They're also like workshops and webinars, particularly webinars, are really affordable to host. They're often free to host. If you're using something like Facebook Live or Instagram Live or YouTube Live, all those things are free. You don't need to pay to have those. You don't need fancy schmancy equipment. The other thing I like is with these webinars is I write them once and I can use them 6, 7, 8 times over the course of a few years because the technology hasn't changed. Or I can repurpose pieces of it and reuse it. I can take a recording from this particular webinar and turn it into lots and lots of small pieces of video content that I might want to use on something like, maybe something like Instagram, LinkedIn, use it for small things like TikTok even. And webinar equipment doesn't have to be expensive. Like I said, you don't have to get fancy stuff. I've got a fancy microphone here because I do voiceovers, I do recordings, and I do this for a living. As I said, I'm doing it like almost a webinar a day these days. So I want to have a damn good microphone because it carries across a better recording of my voice when I'm on places like YouTube, which naturally reduce the quality of the voice. Same with Zoom, it reduces the quality of the voice. So I want the best possible input I can so I don't sound horrible to listen to on those platforms. But you don't need a $400 microphone. You can do it with a $150 Blue Yeti. They're an amazing microphone for the price. Go down as much as $16 on Kogan. There's a condenser microphone. It doesn't come with a stand or anything. It's just the microphone. You might have to buy a stand to put it on. But their condenser microphone is $16. And whilst it's not the best microphone in the world, it's darn sight better than the microphone that's in your webcam, in your laptop computer. So it's going to get you a much better quality of voice for just $16. And Kogan, it's going to take 6 to 8 weeks to turn up. But at $16, heck, you can go to Wish and Amazon and eBay and buy some really good condenser microphones that are really just not expensive at all. And they really up the quality of what you're trying to do online. What they also help you to do, webinars and workshops, is to create your sales funnel. So they help you to generate leads. What we have is that someone will register for your webinar and they go into what we call the top of the funnel. They become aware of what it is you do. They've seen something about you that said, yes, I want to register that. When they attend your webinar or workshop, they're in what we call the consideration part of the funnel. They're hearing about what you do, what you're an expert in, and they're considering maybe even working with you. You haven't even presented the possibility of working with them yet, but they're already starting to think about that, because that's what we do when we meet experts. We go, oh gosh, she really knows what he's talking about. I could make some really good use of this. You also can choose to have a follow-up in the bottom of the funnel. So that's where we go. For instance, we come in for a free webinar, a free workshop. You pop on in, not really knowing that much about the person or what they do, but you want to learn from them. You start to learn and see that they really do know what they're doing. So now you're considering working with them. Well, at the bottom of the funnel, you've got the opportunity maybe at the end of that workshop to go deeper. Now, at the end of my workshops with Business Station, that going deeper is always the opportunity to come in and do the 3 1-hour sessions as part of the digital solutions program, if you haven't already used that up. But I've got other ways you can work with me as well, which are although not as cheap as digital solutions, they're certainly there. The opportunity to get people work one-to-one with you is where you make your better money. Whilst it's really good to be able to get out to a broader audience and sell one-to-many, you need to do a lot of that in order to build enough of a reputation that people are willing to pay to come to your workshops and pay to come to your webinars. I'm only just at the point now where I'm having paid webinars and workshops myself, and I've been doing this for 4 years. But where you can make the immediate money is selling your time for money, which is, $150 for an hour of consultation with you, something like that, that people can access after they've worked out how good you are at what you do and the fact that you do know what you're talking about. So it's a really effective part of a lead generation sales funnel. So that's great. We get that these are really useful. How do you work out what it is that you're an expert in? Because some of us just look at it and go, I'm an expert in eating corn chips in front of the TV watching Netflix. Does that count? I'm an expert in Star Trek and Star Wars mythology. Does that count? What it really is about is finding that thing that you identify as your professional expertise or your niche or your speciality, that one thing that someone that you know more about than other people usually do. And that's where you work out what your topic's going to be. Belinda's just asking, what about setting up an online program? What platforms are best? And what's the best way to record this? We're actually looking at that towards the end. So the online programs, do you mean, I'm assuming you may mean something to do with online courses and what programs to use for those. We could certainly have that conversation towards the end, but just a brief description. I don't believe that Kajabi or any of those expensive ones are particularly good, any better than what cheaper ones through AppSumo are. So AppSumo, APPSUMO, is a daily deal software site. And what it allows you to do, Belinda and everyone else who wants to know about software, is to buy software once and not pay for it again. So you're not paying a monthly subscription of $29, $39, $79. You pay one lot of $29, $39, or $79, and you've got that software for the life of it. So I've done that with a particular course software that I'm using right now. It's not available on AppSumo anymore, sadly, but it's one of those ones where you can actually conduct courses on that. So I'd go to AppSumo, see if they've got course software on there first, then make a decision about what you're going to buy. Because honestly, some of those systems are just super expensive and they don't do any more than what these once pay once go away for life programs do. And there's some really good, really simple ones. And in fact, all these established ones like Kajabi and that, honestly, they are seriously just hard to use. But like you said, Belinda, you can set up a Squarespace website, which then points through to Teachable or Thinkific or one of those, or Udemy as one of those platforms to deliver your courses through. You don't necessarily need to buy a full platform. You can just go and use these other sites to do it. The problem is with things like Teachable is that they're quite limited in their functionality. And because everyone's using them, going to a Teachable course feels like it's a little bit like, oh yeah, another one of those courses where everybody has their courses. And do you record on YouTube? That's a whole other set of questions. I think, Belinda, you probably need some very specific guidance in this area. So I might try and catch up with you after this, because I think we're going a little bit off topic now. Webinars and workshops are not necessarily courses. That's a whole different area. But yeah, let's have a chat about that afterwards. So in the case of identifying your professional expertise and speciality, you've got to work out what it is you're really good at. So in your professional expertise, think about, what are you qualified in? Do you have certificates? Do you have experience in that stuff? What's something you've done for a long time that you know? My mother could be an expert in cross stitching because she's done it most of her adult life. She may not be perfect at baking, but she's very, very good at cross stitching, very, very good at that. My brother is he's a statistics guy when it comes to sport. He could talk about that for half an hour. You wouldn't understand what the hell he's talking about, but he knows all the stats. So he's an expert in that. For me, it's digital marketing, websites, business systems, all that kind of thing. I love those conversations because I've done it for a long time. And there's also those things that you're known to be an expert in amongst the people who are around you. So even at work, whilst you might do the same thing as 3 other people in your department, there's something which you're really good at that they always turn to you. For me, in my earlier digital days, it was like finding answers to questions that people couldn't find. And I'm like, did you just Google it, or did you just skip that and come straight to me? And I tried to put in Google, but I couldn't find it. And I'm like, let me type it in Google. Straight away, we found it. I was a good Googler. These days, Google's really smart. Doesn't need smart Googlers. It just needs you to ask a question and it tends to be able to find it. But you may have that one thing that you're so good at that others really aren't that good at. And that becomes part of what your professional expertise happens to be. Examples could be that I have a master's in business information systems from the University of New South Wales. That's some sort of a professional qualification I have. I've been in marketing related work since 1999 when I was working at a community radio station on the Gold Coast. So that's something that I'm very, very experienced in. Like, it's 2023 now. So that's 24 years that I've been doing this. A long time. I'm particularly known for my knowledge in the community of social media marketing. It's something I find really simple and easy, but it's one of those things where a lot of people find it hard. So that'd be my professional expertise examples. Yours could sit completely different. You may not have one in the qualifications, but you've been working in something for a long time. Or you may not have been working it that long, but you're really, really knowledgeable about this area. All it is just you choose the thing that you think that you're professionally an expert at, and you can turn that into any sort of lessons, courses, webinars, or workshops. Now, you then go from having that thing that you can do to picking the area it's in. So what industry expertise or what specialty area you happen to be in. So the industry expertise could be, what industry have you mostly been known to work in, or you've mostly worked with people in that industry, such as hospitality. Is there a niche in that industry that you're well known in, that you're known for providing really good financial advice and bookkeeping services to somebody who's in tradies? You work really well with tradies with that. Or is your business in an industry that does it serve that industry directly? Are you someone who works as a bookkeeper in a hotel chain, and you know that system so well, you know the industry so well? So you're not just doing something where you're an expert in bookkeeping, but you're an expert in bookkeeping within the hospitality industry, specifically when it comes to hotel businesses. So you've got something which you can talk to, which is a specific skill that there's going to be a ton of people out there who are hotel managers, hotel bookkeepers, hotel finance people, or just general managers of hotel properties that really want to know how to do that thing that you really do know how to do. So this is narrowing down expertise, getting that, what they call the niche, when you're niching down. So an expertise here, another example would be you're a CPA with 25 years of serving tourism businesses. This friend of mine, Michelle, is like this. You could be a digital marketer who works mostly with tradies, like my friend Gavin is, or you're a fragrance maker working with only organic and vegan ingredients. These are areas of very tight expertise, things that there's not that many people who are a CPA, a certified practicing accountant, who also works with tourism, or there's not that many digital marketers who really go out of their way to work just with tradies because they like working with tradies, they understand the industry and the talk. So when you look at those niches, you go, okay, that's where true value is. That's where you sit unique. That's where you can reach an audience that goes well beyond the city or the town that you live in. And then identify where you're going to put your stuff. Where is your geographic market you're going to do this stuff? Are you looking to fill a room with people locally in your market, or are you looking to fill a webinar with people from many different countries around the world? Gosh, there's just a few flags there. It's like US, India, Germany, South Africa, Argentina, Japan, China, Australia, Sweden, Russia, Brazil, South Korea. So there's like 278 countries in the world or something like that. You might not just want to serve your town. So are you limited in your expertise to just people who speak English or people who have a connection to that country? Does your expertise actually cross borders? In bookkeeping, it might not be that appropriate to be an Australian bookkeeper who's helping someone out in Angola in Africa, because there's no relationship between those two things. But in my case, in digital marketing, I routinely work with people both in Britain, in Germany, and in South Africa and Canada and the US. Mostly, again, English-speaking places. But my second biggest market other than Australia is actually Indonesia. I work with tons of people in Indonesia at the moment because they're looking for that sort of level of expertise when it comes to digital marketing that they can't really get within Indonesia itself, because the market isn't quite as mature in marketing as, say, we are. So those geographic market examples could be that you once lived in or worked in a particular town and city, so you've got a very close relationship with it. So you feel like, you know what, I once lived in Bargo, south of Sydney, so I'm going to try and get into a webinar that takes in people in Bargo and the surrounding towns like Picton and maybe even up to Camden and Campbelltown, so that I'm sort of being very niche to the area, and I've got lots of geographical and local references I can make because I understand that market. Or you might speak Korean, so you can deliver workshops in Korean. That's something that's like way easier for you because you can speak to people who speak that language as well. And they're nowhere near as well served with that stuff as English language places are. I've always been told that, if you want to make a go in digital marketing, do it in another language other than English, because my goodness, there's such a lack of expertise in digital marketing when it comes to people who speak Greek, Italian, German, Russian, Ukrainian, well, not so much Ukrainian anymore, but maybe they speak Hebrew or they speak Spanish is a huge one. Such a lack of expertise in that language, but by goodness, there's a lot of people who speak that language. Or maybe you speak Bahasa Indonesia. That would be a fantastic way of just getting an excuse to go to Bali, to do some workshops. It'd be good. You might have an art technique that's not limited to a particular country, so that you can teach people that art over a workshop or a webinar, that's held online, no matter where people are. Or you may be in a big city like Brisbane or Perth, where you're able to actually access people in a large group that isn't the group that you'd normally be part of. So you can go, just for women who speak English, who are married with kids, or you just go as niche down as you want to be. But the idea is to make it feel like it's really easy for people to deal with you because they can relate to that niche. Now we ask, what's your experiential expertise? What's the expertise you've got in terms of study, experience? What is something that you're closely related to in your business in which you're an expert? Are you known, but not known for are you known for a particular expertise? Is there one thing that you're really, really heavily known for? This is just, the easy, low-hanging fruit that you could develop something about. The experiential expertise examples would be that you've never studied marketing, but you've worked in it for 12 years. You're a plumber, but you're also a cinematic drone pilot. So it's like, wow, I'm known to this thing, but I do this other thing. You're a bookkeeper, but you're also maybe an expert in teaching how to use MYOB. So there's tons of little side things you can do. For instance, I'm an experienced marketer of nearly 24 years, but I'm also a hive of facts and figures about Star Trek and Star Wars that I can go into online forums and actually have long conversations about the background lore and stories behind these universes. It's very nerdy stuff. But you'll find that there's stuff you have experience in that isn't necessarily reflected in your job or in your qualifications. So once you've got that idea, you know what your expertise is, now you've got to claim it. I sound like Brene Brown, you're going to name it and claim it. So in this case, we're just going to claim that expertise. So what we do, we say, well, you make some kind of like really strong statement that enables you to go, I have been doing this for this long. I have success in doing this thing. And I've tried many ways of getting to where I am now. And this is the one true process that I believe you should try. This is where you are getting really, really clear on what it is you're able to do and how your success has been. The experiential expertise examples in here would be that you've been baking wedding cakes for 27 years. You've tried 3 different types of training before you found this one method. You failed at business and you learned the lesson and then you succeeded. And this is how you did it. This is where you get a bit of a hook, but people are coming in with a hook and they say, yes, I would love to hear from someone who's been baking wedding cakes for 27 years. They will know a few things about it. In fact, if I walk away with just this one thing of how to choose a wedding cake maker that's not going to rip me off, that is a good piece of information. That's worth sitting down for an hour to learn about. Or you might say, I'm going into a training job, and I haven't trained anyone for quite a few years, so it's worth sitting through a 1-hour webinar with someone to learn these 3 different types of training. And I might get to the end of it and go, actually, you know what? I do need a bit more training in training, so I might need to book a couple of sessions with this person to really bring out my best inside trainer. So these sort of things help you to not just differentiate your experience, but you also help you to create that hook that's going to grab people and drag them in. I know that, for instance, I really like it when there's a YouTube video, which is something like, I bet you've been having trouble trying to do X. Well, I've got a 3-step process that will show you how to do it. And I go, oh, a 3-step process, that's quick. And I go in there, I find out my 3 steps and I go and apply it and it works. And I'm like, I've come out of that with a very satisfactory experience. And you'll do the same when you're looking to train yourself in different things. And in addition to that, if you create something that's numbered, so here's the 4 things you need to do in order to be able to perform digital marketing. Here's the 3 things you never knew about sending out emails to a big list. Here's the 7 things that every small business should know about bookkeeping before they try to do it themselves. Those kind of things, they're like catnip to us. We love numbers and we love the idea those numbers are limited, because once we start to say 3, 4, 5, 7, even 12 things, we go, yeah, that's cool. I can absorb 12 things. But once we start looking at 101 ways to do this, we start to go, oh, that's going to be heavy and that's going to take a long, long time. That sounds like it's going to be more than a 1-hour webinar. So now we've got all that background there. How do we establish that expertise? We establish it with what we call social credibility. This is where you can state who you've worked with. So this is something like saying, I've done this workshop with this many businesses, or I've got this many degrees or qualifications, or I've been seen on TV, or you can read me on Yahoo Finance or in Forbes online magazine or in a blog over here, or you've heard me on a radio station. Those kind of pieces of social credibility are important, because no one's going to choose you because you had that degree. No one's going to choose you because you worked with that one individual company, and no one's going to choose you just because you happen to be heard on their local radio station. But they may choose you for a combination of all those things. They trust your expertise. They get that you've got qualifications. They get that you work with good people. They get that you've been heard on the radio. So they go, well, all those things combined help to create a lot of trust. I feel like this person is the real deal. I feel like this person is the right person to work with. So the social credibility can be something like you've worked with 3 government programs and 5 national brands in the last 3 years. Great. That means that, if you've done that, then you're probably pretty good at what you do. You might have a diploma in landscape gardening that makes someone feel like you're not just someone who's coming along mowing lawns and digging holes. You actually know what you're doing when it comes to taking care of gardens. You might have a regular guest interview spot on radio. In that case, you wouldn't be talking on the radio unless you were able to adequately communicate what your expertise is, and people would actually agree with that enough that they put you on a radio segment. So those kind of things are a combination of that. Now, again, no one's going to choose you because you happen to work with those 5 national brands or because you've got that diploma or you've had a guest interview spot on the radio, but they might look at it and go, the combination of all those things is making it so much easier for me to choose you than what it is to choose anyone else, because you come with all this credibility. And that to me is really attractive. That makes me feel safe. And you can confirm that expertise by having an opinion about the things that are going on in your world. You can say, well, I might be an expert in making scented candles, but I'm not going to be, I don't believe that using the current soy wax method is the best way of getting it happening. I think we need to use this, and this because it's more sustainable, it's far less toxic, and it holds the fragrance for longer or something like that. You have an opinion, it enables you to stand out. So when you go to LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram, having an opinion immediately sets you apart. My friend Mia Farman, she is the head of a business called Campaign Del Mar, and she's very opinionated. That's her thing. She's got lots of heavy opinions. She doesn't mince words. She's a no BS marketer, and I think that's a great approach for her to take. And it certainly makes people want to work with her because they know that they're not getting all the fluff and workaround. They're getting the best possible information. Excuse me. Take a standpoint or stand for something. Have something that you can stand for that makes you stand out. Just saying like, learn how to do bookkeeping with MyOb. It's like, oh, that's great. I can do that on a YouTube video. Why would I come to your webinar or your workshop to learn how to do that when I can do that myself? Well, the reasons might be because 7 things you didn't know that MyOb could do to help your business save more money. I go, that is something I want to watch. I don't even use MyOb, I use Xero, and I'd still want to go and find out what those things are, just in case Xero does them too. You can also take on a leadership role in your market or industry. And that doesn't mean literally getting promoted to a manager or an owner or something like that. It's more about leadership is where you step out, you have an opinion, and you conduct conversations with people who then agree with you, and you become naturally the leading voice in that industry or in that way of thinking. So for instance, I speak out a lot about personal branding, and in amongst my audience, I've now become the first person that they see as having a valid opinion that works for them in digital marketing. Does that mean that I'm necessarily the nation's leader in that and the thought leader of the world in that? Absolutely not. But in my world, in my sphere of influence, that is certainly the case. Now, how do you turn all this into a class? We've looked at all this stuff, all the attraction, all the ideas. How do we now turn that into a class? Well, we can do it through an in-person workshop. We can do it through a live webinar or a live video, or you can do it through an online course. So we're not going to really cover the online course part of it at all. We're talking more about the workshop or the webinar or video. And this is where we're going to go into a bit more information. Now, the in-person workshop, surprise, surprise, is more personal and intimate because people are actually there in front of you. It's a nice environment. All of you have probably been in a live workshop before, and it's just a really nice place to be. You have better access to the expert. It's literally sitting in the room with you. Like they're not just sitting there as being a participant, but they're there in the room with you, and they're participating, asking questions, answering questions, giving their examples as well. There's a high rate of conversion when you've got people in a room with you. That's why a lot of seminars used to be held in the 90s and the early 2000s for network marketing schemes and timeshare investments and things like that. Because the thought was, if you can get people in the room, you've got the opportunity to inspire them, and it gets them motivated and excited about something, so that finally, when they're ready to buy something, they're there in the room with you right now. You can sign them up whilst the hype is still going in their heads. They don't have that thing where they get home, think about it, logic kicks in, they go, you know what, I'm not going to do that. I just Yeah. I'm going to go and think about it, right? We know that when they say that, they're not going to follow through with it. But if people are in the room, you're most likely to get them onto the next stage of your journey. So that next stage of your journey is booking them in a one-to-one or getting them into a paid workshop. You can get them to book and pay for it right then and there, or buy your book or something like that. In-person workshops are unbeatable for that. There's no way that a webinar can ever live up to that rate of possibility of conversion. The live webinar or the video means that more people can attend. I cannot accommodate 1,000 people in my meeting room, but I certainly can on a Zoom webinar. I can make it automated. I can do it on social media. When I say you can automate a live video, you can actually got platforms that allow you to do that. I've got a live webinar platform that allows me to do the webinar live, record it, run it, and it simulates a live running webinar that I can run every single day. So for instance, if you wanted to revisit any of these videos, I could run that as a webinar at a certain time of the day. In fact, I could have it starting every 15 minutes if I wanted to. I just got to go and set all that stuff up. I've got the recordings. I can certainly do it, right? All I need to do is get that edited in a format where people can jump into it at any time. Now, the beauty of that is, yes, I get to get their email address, so they register for it, so it adds to my list. But they can really just do that same sort of stuff on YouTube. If they wanted to see a recording thing that's never been done before, that I've already done before and it's already recorded, they can just go to my YouTube channel and pick that up. So that automated webinar thing is kind of becoming a little bit less relevant now, because we know generally that it's used to sort of scam people into very expensive courses that are not worth the paper they're written on. They're usually not written on paper. They do have a much lower conversion rate because they also have a much lower turnout. I think Clem's been to a number of my workshops before. When I do an online version of it, more people certainly turn up to the online version, but also, about maybe a third of the people who booked actually rock up to even to the webinar. So for instance, in this case, I've probably got about a 70% turnout for those who booked this, which is great. That's a really successful result. But let's say if I got 97 people booked to be in my webinar, but only 3 of them turned up, that's not giving me much of a chance to convert people into what the next stage in my journey is. So getting people in a room certainly is more effective for that than using a live webinar or a live video on something like Facebook or Instagram or LinkedIn. And then, of course, there's the online course. These are really funny because they are completely automated, right? You're not really participating. Everything's recorded and automated. And as such, they've got a very low rate of completion. In fact, the online course world has about a 92% non-completion rate. Because what happens, people get in there, they're all riled up and ready to go. They don't finish it because the courses are terrible. Most online courses by people who are self-professed experts, they don't know how to build courses. They don't know how to present. They don't know how to record things properly. The audio quality is terrible. The video quality is terrible. They're terrible. Like online, that's why I don't really like doing online courses myself. I have to come around and do them eventually. But the reason why I don't want to do them is because I know damn well people get into them and don't finish them. Heck, I know that I've had well over 2,000 people now finish my free mini courses, which are delivered via email. So you just literally read the email and that's a module. And I still get like a ton of people never, ever complete them. Even though it's forcefully sent to them, I can see that they haven't opened those emails. They've got to the end of the journey. They still haven't opened email number 2, let alone finished up on email number 5. So when you see that, we go, while they might seem really attractive to doing, we might be able to sell them. Is anyone getting any value out of them? And that might be why so few people these days are even signing up for online courses anymore, because they just don't finish them and they don't see a lot of value in them. Pretty much everything you can learn on almost every online course that's online these days can be learned for free from YouTube. That's a sobering statistic. So it makes you think, well, is an online course the way to go, or should we be back into these live events, these live workshops, these live webinars, rather than these pre-recorded generic things where you don't get to ask questions because it's not really interactive? The difference is, though, online courses are really easy to charge for, but You can do that with a workshop too. There's nothing wrong with you charging $20 for a workshop. Another mate of mine here in Darwin has just started a preparing for retirement webinar, a seminar. It's a live seminar, and it's going to cost you $300 to do it. He's not shy on that because he said, if you're really serious about this, you are going to invest this money. He did a test of it. It's a 3-hour program. Way too long for me to sit through on any sort of lesson. Think about kids, man. They can't sit through more than about 20 minutes before they start getting fidgety. I'm like that. Trying to sit down for 3 hours to do a lesson? No, thank you. Not for me. So how do you create these things? How do you create the webinars and the workshops? Well, an in-person workshop can be booked in a meeting room, a church hall, a local member of parliament's offices. They're often free as well as you live in the electorate. Shared spaces like co-working spaces, if you've got any of those near you. You can then set up the ticketing on something like Eventbrite, or what I think is the better version of Eventbrite, because it's a not-for-profit, it's Australian, and it donates all its booking fees through to educational programs for disadvantaged children, is Humanitix. So you can use up your bookings in there. You can even set up things on Calendly. I don't know if you've ever come across Calendly, but it's a simple calendar booking system. That booking system allows you to then go, okay, I need to be able to have 20 people. So as it's going down, count it down. That's 19 to go, 18 to go, 17 to go. So people can see the scarcity of what's left and they can make sure they book themselves in for it as well. And it can even take payments like Eventbrite and Humanitix can. So if you don't want one of those ticketing systems, you don't want all the extra fees that come with it, you can actually do this through Calendly, take the payments, and it's done through either PayPal or Stripe. You're only paying for the credit card fee. You're not paying any fee for, the event from Eventbrite, which takes a lot of very big fees. And then advertise your event through Facebook and LinkedIn and Instagram, wherever you need to go to advertise that particular workshop. So it's not that hard to set these things up. A lot of what happens is people think, oh, who do I think I am setting up this thing? What kind of hero am I? What's my qualification to get in front of 30 people and teach them how to do something? My first workshop ever, not for Business Station, but for another time when I was living on the Gold Coast, I held it at Oxenford McDonald's party room. And I turned up and the party room didn't exist. They don't have a party room. They let me book a party room. They didn't have one. So because the restaurant was pretty busy, it's dinner time, I took a big concrete table outside, which could seat in the middle of winter. So it wasn't the most pleasant. And thankfully about 5 people turned up. And so I was able to do something. I converted 2 of those people into clients, one who is still a client today. That was back in 2016. And I didn't know what I was doing. I clearly didn't know it. I didn't even have a screen to be able to share like slides with people. It was just a conversation where people turned up and asked their questions about how to advertise on Facebook. You can certainly do better than that. My failed workshop in a McDonald's meeting room. I then did several others. Did one in, I think it was Brassel in Ipswich, and then another one in Ormo in the Gold Coast. Did another one at Rabina. And as I moved around all these different McDonald's, I got a following. People would follow me from meeting to meeting. Then suddenly I got access to a hall at the Gold Coast tech space that I was able to do in Mudgeeraba. So that made it a lot more significant again. And I was suddenly getting 30 and 40 people turning up to these seminars. So it was becoming more valuable to me. I was converting a lot more clients to the point where now I'm doing one of these almost every day. So getting those spaces isn't that hard. There's tons of spaces around. If you don't want to spend money, local member of parliament is usually the best bet. Community centres, like your local council community centres, you may need things like what they call it, public liability insurance. So you may need that before you can rent those kind of places out. Or otherwise, just use shared spaces in shared co-working environments. Just look at what's available. Look at what's available. See where other things are being held, and then approach those places to see if they're available to be booked and whether there's a cost involved. Sometimes if you're a member of something like a co-working space or a member of a collective that is about technology or that, they will have a space that you can use that you don't have to pay for. The live webinars or videos can be done on Facebook, YouTube, Insta, or you can do them on systems like Zoom, like we're doing right now. This is a webinar delivered via Zoom, by Teams, by Google Meet, via GoToWebinar, via WebEx, and you can do your ticketing the same way as on the real life ones through Eventbrite and Humanitix. And then the same thing, advertise on Facebook and LinkedIn. The only difference is you're not booking a room. You can do it from the kitchen table. You can do it from your lounge room, your office. You can stay back after work a little bit and do it in a quiet environment where you don't have a lot of people sort of scrambling all around you. The idea is here to make sure you're doing it in some kind of way that sort of makes it easy for you to be able to do this stuff, to be able to do these things, I guess, in a space where people feel comfortable. And sometimes that's not in a place. Sometimes that's in a webinar and someone like Zoom, where they're going to feel safer to be able to do that kind of stuff and to learn and to participate. Online courses you can do through your own website. If you're using a WordPress website, there's a system called LearnDash, which is a learning system much like Teachable or Kajabi or Thinkific or any of those that handles, that's hosted within your own website. It's pretty good. It's a bit complicated. It can be a bit clunky, just like anything on WordPress is, I guess. But once you conquer it, you've conquered it, and you'll be able to do lots of stuff in there. Teachable is probably one of the big ones. Udemy is another one. The only problem with Udemy is quite often they'll take your course and they'll discount it as a special, and they don't ask your permission to do that. They just do it. So instead of your $80 you'd normally get, you're getting $2.99, which I'd be really annoyed by. So I never say people to go to Udemy and put their courses on there, because it's just too easy for people to rip it off, for Udemy to rip you off, to be honest. GuruCan is one of those pay once, never pay again systems that I got once upon a time on AppSumo. Kajabi is an expensive and quite complicated system. It got very, very popular amongst coaches there for a while. The main reason for that being was that it was like an all-in-one system. It handled all the email marketing. It hosted the course. You were able to book times through it. It had the meeting bookings and all that sort of thing. It was a really good system, but it's aged badly and it's a bit clunky and it's very expensive as well. And the same thing, you just promote your courses on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, get people to know, like, and trust you enough to be able to spend some money on your courses and on your coaching services as well. The structure of a class, this is an interesting one to look at. I work on the rule of 3 to make things really as simple as I possibly can. And the rule of 3 is basically that we struggle to retain more than 3 key ideas during a lesson. There's 3 big ideas you're going to share in every class and every lesson that are going to come across clearly. The rest is going to be like mud. It's just not going to be remembered. It's going to be fuzzy. You're not really going to remember the details of it. But these 3 big ideas you'll walk away from. Now, usually I'm a little bit less. I've got less of an attention span. So I tend to walk away from every lesson I walk into with one major thing. And that thing could be life-changing, or it could be just a really small thing, just a small idea or a quote that I heard that really came to me and really grabbed me and really sort of they locked a learning in place for me. But when we're trying to add so much information, like I'm trying to do in this webinar, I know darn well that you're not going to walk away knowing all this stuff. That's why we put these on YouTube, so you can refer back to them later and go, okay, I understand what that was. Now I can learn it again. So people are really going to walk away with 3 main ideas that you're going to try and teach. Those 3 main ideas could be anything to do with, your big thing, your big ideas. Now we get to each slide. You notice my slides are not busy with lots of writing. That's because that's too much for people to be able to take in. So I try to make it, there's no more than 3 kind of elements on the screen. There's writing, there's an image, and there may be a background, but I don't like to put my every page to have a logo on it. You don't need to see my logo every single page. You saw it at the beginning, you'll see it at the end. That's enough. I don't need to clutter things up. The more things you add, the eyes don't know where to land. And those of us with any kind of ADHD or any sort of attention deficit problems will be all over the place. Dyslexia, all over the place. You won't understand it. Those clear 3 points with one illustrative piece of graphic are enough. You don't need to over-design these things. You don't need to make your slides the most beautiful things in the world. They just need to be easy to be understood. That's why all mine are very, very simple. So to stick to that, 3 main ideas, 3 points per slide. And I'll add one more thing in there, thanks to a guy called Guy Kawasaki. who's like a marketing genius out of America. And Guy Kawasaki has this rule, no more than 20 minutes, no more than 10 slides, and no smaller than a 30-point font. You notice my writing's very big on my screens. That's because I don't want to overwhelm people with too much information. So follow that no less than a 30-point font. So that size has to be at least 30, no smaller than that. It's too hard to read. And particularly with people with dyslexia, can be really confusing and really bothered. Now, this one is like an idea. This is too much writing for me, but I needed to put it all on one screen. Otherwise, you wouldn't carry across those things to the next one. In an in-person workshop, you really just need a whiteboard to take down people's questions. You might want a display screen or a wall that you can project onto, or a big TV screen you can plug into, access to power, toilets, maybe some refreshments as well. You need accessibility, people to be able to get into the room who have wheelchairs or walking aids or things like that, where they don't have, where you've got to make it as easy as possible for them to get in. And then you can provide notes, note paper and pens, but ultimately people will tend to bring their own. If people are paying to be in your webinar, maybe, your workshop, maybe consider taking in note paper and pens. But if they're getting it for free, they can bring their own. You don't have to supply everything for free. In a video webinar, good broadband internet. I've got like expensive internet. I pay $150 a month for my internet here in my office because I want it to be reliable and always on and always fast. Have backup internet ready to go. So I've got my Telstra mobile with fast internet on it. So I've got tons of internet allowance on that. I pay way too much for it, but I know that this thing goes down, if this internet here in my office goes down, I've always got my mobile internet to go in there. Having a bright and cheerful background, or a clean background at the very least, will help you to be able to communicate clearly without being distracted. If you've got cats and dogs and things moving around the background. I was on a webinar earlier today where the presenter had an animation going on around her. It was very distracting when you're trying to look at the screen of the points and you've got this little corner bit where there's this constant movement. The ADHD in me just wanted to go and focus in on it. Having a good microphone is probably more important than having a good camera. People will forgive bad visuals more than they'll forgive bad audio. You think about this. If this was really tinny audio, it'd be so hard to listen to. So having a good microphone is more important than buying a big, U-Butte DSLR camera to do the recording of the video for you. Having a good computer that can take these kind of programs. I've noticed that my computer now is up to about 2.5 years old now. So it's starting to get that point where it's not at its peak, but it's certainly workable. I'd probably get another year out of this before I need to upgrade. Having a computer that can do this well is very important, and also having knowledge of these systems. Just don't turn up and do your first Zoom webinar without you knowing how Zoom webinars work, or doing a presentation through Microsoft Teams if you don't know how to let people in the room. So know the systems you're about to use. That's ultimately important. With an online course, much the same. Instead of going live, you're recording things. So a good microphone, a good camera, rehearsing what you're about to do, very important. Slides and notes that you can read off as you're going. Questions and answers ready to go in case people haven't asked them before. So you already have questions and answers, or frequently asked questions. Assessments, if you want to assess how your students are going as they're working through your course. Not all systems do that. I like to have assessments, just one question at the end of each module, just to reinforce a piece of learning. And the other thing with online courses is to have a bit of an upsell. So for instance, they do your course, what's next? Oh, well, you can book in a one-to-one. Great, that's the upsell. Or you can book into our live event that's coming up on the 23rd of September. Great, there's an upsell. There's somewhere that people can go after the course. They're not stuck at the course and just stopping. They've got a pathway to keep moving through. The most successful coaches and workshop operators always have somewhere where they can send you next. So as a recap, as we wrap all this up, find the thing you're an expert in. Just explore it. There's going to be something. Establish and then confirm your expertise by talking about it on social media. Find the platform you want to work on, whether it's live in workshops, whether it's in a Zoom webinar or a Zoom call, or you want to do it through an online course system like Kajabi or any of the others that are out there. And have those right tools and systems and know how to use them. Because when you turn up to that event and you don't know how to use your systems, it's going to make it a bad experience for you and an even worse experience for your attendees. because they're coming there to see their expert. If their expert can't even open the system right, suddenly that expertise kind of runs away a little bit. Well, thank you so much for joining in on this late part of the day. You can get in touch with me through Dante at businessstation.com.au. You can follow me on LinkedIn. That's probably the best way to get hold of me. In fact, it's like I'm looking at my phone. I've got about 15 LinkedIn messages popped up over the last hour. So it's like bling, bling, bling. Like, okay, clearly that's the place where people learn they can get hold of me. Facebook, Instagram, any of those places, you can find me as well. But all I want to say is thank you for taking time out of your business to work on your business idea. I hope you can put this together. Please do use your 3 1-hour sessions if you haven't used them. You can book me in. I can gladly help you out with this kind of stuff. After all, doing one of these every day practically. Thank you. And I hope to see you in the next one of the videos that I'm doing this week. Have a great week.